Today I'm going to show you how I edit my photos for Instagram by creating and using my own presets in Lightroom CC. If you've ever seen my Instagram and you like the vibe of my photos, then this video is for you because I'm going to show you exactly how you can achieve it yourself and give you a rundown of how to use Lightroom in case you're new to it. Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Katie Steckly, and I am obsessed with Instagram. Over the past year or so, I have created a ton of my own presets that I use to create a certain look with my Instagram photos. And it's definitely not the same look every time. I'm the kind of person that really likes to shift and change the theme of my Instagram feed through the seasons, and if there's any like significant events that happen, then I might shift my feed to kind of suit those photos. So basically what I've ended up with is a collection of presets that are sort of themed around my travels. Especially when I go somewhere new and I take a bunch of new photos, I love experimenting with new editing styles. So basically, I have a lot of different presets that don't really look that similar. But I think it's fun. I think it's good to change things up with your Instagram feed and try out new things. So if you're in that position, hey, maybe today is the day to try that with these editing tips that I'm gonna teach you in Lightroom. I'm gonna try to show you not only the technical tips, but also my creative process for deciding what changes to make while I edit my photos, because I think that can sometimes be the most challenging part. So with that being said, let's dive in. Today, I'm gonna show you how I edit using Lightroom CC on my laptop, but honestly, it is almost identical to the Lightroom on your phone. So you can open up Lightroom CC on your phone right now and follow along with all the editing steps that I am gonna show you, because I promise you it might not look exactly the same, but you can find these exact same tools and features inside the mobile app. And the mobile app is free, which is definitely a benefit. I already have a subscription to Adobe Creative Cloud, so that's why I have Lightroom on my computer. But just in case you're keeping track at home, I do use the sort of like modern Lightroom CC version on my laptop. I don't use Lightroom Classic, which is why it's pretty much identical to the one on your phone, like I was just saying. So with that being said, let's start the screen recording and I'll show you how I edit. So to start off our tutorial today, I'm gonna pull up some of my old travel photos because you know your girl hasn't really been anywhere, done anything since the pandemic. So let's take a look at this photo that I took on the rooftop of the hotel that we stayed in New York in February. I think this is a great photo for an example because sometimes you might run into issues too where you take a photo and there's obviously problems with this photo, right? Like the sky is really overexposed, it's sort of blue looking. So I'm gonna talk you through all the different panels in Lightroom and how you can fix this to make it look more neutral, and then how you can stylize it going forward from there. Okay, so you'll notice the very first thing you can change is under the category light. We can change the exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. You can see what happens when I start to brighten the exposure and make it darker. It's pretty obvious that it changes the brightness of the photo. In this case, I'm actually gonna keep the exposure pretty similar, but I'm just gonna lower it like the littlest bit. Contrast, I'm gonna keep pretty much the same as well because I don't like an overly contrasty look. Actually, if anything, I think I'm gonna reduce my contrast. Highlights is where I'm gonna start to make the biggest changes because when I took this photo, when my friend, also named Katie, took this photo of me, that's not a joke, that's serious, her name's just Katie. The highlights in the sky were just a little too bright. So I'm gonna bring the highlights down like a bunch and you'll start to see how the sky all of a sudden becomes blue. So I'm literally reducing them the maximum amount, which is maybe extreme, but I think it works for this photo. And I'm actually gonna bring up my shadows so that I get a little bit more detail in the darker parts of the photo. You can see if I bring them up all the way, it becomes like a really flat image, which I kind of vibe with. I kind of like the look of that, but I'm actually just gonna do it to like maybe 65 or so. So it's not quite so like washed out looking. Whites and blacks have a similar effect. You're just basically either turning up the brightness on the whites or turning down the brightness on the whites, and the same with the blacks. So you can just play around with that to see what you like. I'm gonna actually bring the whites up a little bit and the blacks up as well. That's the move. Okay, so another main thing with this is that it looks really blue to me, and that's obviously because the background is mostly blue, but I'm gonna scroll down to color, where we're gonna start with the temperature first. So I'm actually gonna just experiment with like turning up the temperature a little bit, because you'll see the biggest thing is that my skin looks a little bit more like a regular skin tone instead of like overly blue. So I think I'm happy with it there. I always leave tint the same way because you're gonna start getting weird skin tones if you change the tint. You'll notice mine is automatically adjusted to +16. That's because I imported a raw image, and raw images, when you shoot them with your mirrorless or DSLR camera, they'll actually hold on to that information about the white balance and the tint, and so Lightroom will like already know what white balance your camera selected. But if you import a photo from your iPhone, it'll just start at 0 for all of these settings. Saturation and vibrance, I tend to leave the same because I think it can start to look really unnatural. You'll see if I up the vibrance a lot. I mean, vibrance, I think if you're gonna change either of these, vibrance is the one to do because it's a little bit more natural looking. But you'll see if I up the saturation, it's just like, whoa, like, is this a picnic edit from like 2011? So we're just gonna bring that back down to like at the most +2 or 3, but I think I'll just leave it at 0. Okay, now we're at the color mix panel, which is the most fun one in my opinion, because this is where you can really change stuff to get a certain look. Where I usually like to start is the teals and the blues, because you'll notice throughout a lot of my different edits, I love a good teal and orange combo. Obviously, the kind of undertone of human skin is like an orange color, so I feel like having teal with that, it just looks like a good combo. But as with anything, you don't want to take it too far or it starts to look kind of cheesy. So anyway, what I'm going to do is open up the blue panel, and I'm just going to take that hue and slide it over towards the teal. You'll see how like everything becomes really green when I take it that far, but I'm just going to kind of bring it midway so that everything looks a little bit more teal, and I like how that looks, especially with like the more like browny orange buildings in the background. Saturation, I'm gonna bring up just a little bit because I really like that teal to pop. And then under luminance is where I could change the lightness or the darkness of those shades. Hues. I'm gonna make them a little bit brighter actually. Blue is the main one that I like to change, but of course you could do this with any color, and I'll show you the impacts of that in some of my other example images. But I just wanna point out here that you can change the hue, the saturation, and the luminance on every single color in this panel. And that is what's gonna give you some really unique looks and help you to have a very uniform feed. Because if in all of your photos you make your blues teal and, you know, desaturate your greens or whatever it is, that'll start to help your photos look really consistent if you apply this preset to all of your photos, or just apply the same sort of editing method. I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm gonna move on to the effects panel. So you can see we can change the texture, clarity, dehaze, vignette, grain. That's a lot of different stuff. You can just experiment with these. You can see that if I increase the texture, what happens? It kind of becomes just more textured. I don't know how to explain it. If you decrease it, it becomes more blurry. Clarity does a similar thing. Dehaze can be useful if it was like legitimately cloudy when you took the photo. Honestly, because this video is about how I edit, I'll just tell you, I don't really change a lot of these. In my personal Lightroom editing process, I kind of leave them as is unless there's a specific reason not to. Now, detail is where I will make some adjustments. So I do like to increase the sharpening on my images because I think that it makes them really pop in the Instagram feed. Noise reduction I will use if basically I had my ISO too high and the photo is grainy. You can increase the noise reduction, and like in this image you don't see a big difference because there isn't really any noise in it, but if it was really grainy it would sort of like blur out that noise to make it look better. But sometimes if you take it too far it looks almost like blurry, if that makes sense. Moving down into the optics, these are going to be applicable if you did shoot these on a different camera other than your iPhone. So you can see that if I unclick enable lens correction, how that kind of changes the look of the image. So I do usually enable it. And that's the general process for editing my photos. There's definitely a lot more detail I could get into here, but I'm just trying to keep it easy and straightforward so that you can start to apply the same process to your editing. So if I show the original, you can see it was really dark, really blue. And then when we uncheck that, you can see that it brightens up, we get some more color and some more interest in the photo. Then what I usually do, if I have a lot of photos that I've taken that are kind of in the same setting or similar lighting conditions, what you can do is go into the presets panel, click on the 3 dots, and then click create preset, and then you can name it whatever you want. save it in a certain group, and then click save, and that is how you would be able to use that preset for future use. So I'm just gonna reset these edits because that was kind of an example, and I'll show you then how I use my existing presets. I'll just go into my preset folder here and I'll select New York City, and you can see how big of a difference that makes automatically. And of course, as with any preset, you're gonna go in and change things around afterwards to make it look perfect for that particular photo. All right, to give another example of my editing process, I'm gonna dive in and edit this photo that I actually took earlier today to show off my cute new outfit and my beautiful new sustainable jewelry. Which seems like the perfect moment to give a special shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Ana Luisa. Ana Luisa is a sustainable jewelry brand based in Brooklyn, New York that creates amazing pieces out of recycled gold and sterling silver. Not only is Ana Luisa really sustainable, their pricing is also quite accessible, and they are very transparent about their pricing structure. You can get pieces from them starting at $49, and again, this is all with actual gold and sterling silver that is recycled, which I just think is super cool. My personal preference is for gold jewelry because I just think it looks nicer with my skin tone, so I got a couple pieces from Ana Luisa which I'm obsessed with, including these hoops, and I also got this ear cuff, which I think is super cute because I love the look of a piercing here, but I'm kind of too lazy / chicken to get it. When I got this pierced, like honestly, I'm still not sure it's healed, and it's been like a year. So I don't think I need another one. Instead, I can just use this cute cuff and it kind of fakes it. Plus I got this adorable crescent moon necklace. I just love the minimalist style of all this really dainty gold jewelry. It just really is cute. I love it. And I'm so excited that I found a company that creates this really trendy jewelry in a sustainable way. So if you are interested in getting your own recycled gold and sterling silver jewelry from Ana Luisa, then go to analuisa.com/KatieSteckly, and you can use my code KatieSteckly10 for 10% off of your purchase. I'm sure you're gonna love all of your pieces just like I love mine. So that being said, let's look at how I edited my Instagram photo where I'm wearing this outfit and this jewelry. Okay, so for this example, I'm actually gonna show you how I use an existing preset and then modify it to suit the image perfectly. Because like I was saying before, I believe with any preset, you're gonna need to modify it for each photo because every photo is different. Lighting conditions are always changing. A preset can be a really great way to get you started in a certain direction with editing, and then you can just make tweaks to make it perfect. So for this image, I'm gonna use my Kitchener preset. Hometown, represent. I'm really liking how it's looking so far, but it is a little bit maybe washed out in places, so I'm just gonna play around with the light panel. So I think I'm actually gonna reduce the exposure just the littlest bit so it's not too bright. I'm gonna keep the highlights low because I think that kind of shows more detail in the wall. I like the shadows like brightened up quite a bit. Because I think especially if you're wearing black clothing, it can bring more texture to the clothes rather than it just being completely black so you can't really see it. So I'm gonna bring up the blacks as well for that same effect. I like that the temperature is on the warmer side. I think that it kind of gives it a summery feel, so I'm gonna leave that. Just to show you another example of how the color mixer panel works, we'll open up the green tab and I'll show you how it impacts the color of the tree when I change these parameters. So I have the hue slid over to kind of the yellow end. You'll see that if I go all the way, it becomes like a very sort of like yellowy green color, and if I bring it to the other end, it becomes a very bluey green color. So personally, I find that blue green like it doesn't look very realistic to me, so I kind of like the more like yellowy, almost like dry summer green kind of thing. Then I desaturated just a little bit because if you see if I put the saturation up, it's just kind of like this lime green. I feel like it's not the cutest thing ever, so I like to desaturate it. I find a lot of influencers do this. Like it seems to be a big trend to just completely desaturate your greens. I like it kind of in between. I don't want it completely desaturated, but I think having it really highly saturated isn't cute either. I like to bring the luminance up a little bit because it just kind of makes it this more, I don't even know how to describe it, but like I personally love like a eucalyptus type green where it's almost like a grayish, lighter color green. So I like to bring up the luminance to kind of achieve that a little bit more. Now I'm realizing as I edit this that I'm kind of a little bit askew. So I'm gonna go over to the cropping panel And I'll just try the auto rotate. Yeah, I don't think it's quite it. So I'm gonna just like rotate it so that the actual like line between the building and the ground is like a straight line across. So again, just to compare, we'll go over here and click show original. So you can see like, you know, it's a fine photo, but it's a little bit dark. And when I go back to the edited version, I just think it brings out all those warm kind of summer vibes. And I will go over to this close-up shot and add the preset as well. And again, I'm just gonna like decrease the exposure so it's not too bright. So you can see that presets are not gonna be 100% perfect, but they're a really great way to start quickly editing your photos, and this is how I do it. So speaking of how I do it, in case you really like the look of any of the presets that I showed in this video or the ones that you may have seen on my Instagram feed, I finally decided to make my presets available for purchase on my website. Honestly, partially because my friend Sarah has been telling me to do this for months. I'm finally doing it. You can go to katiesteckly.com/presets. I'll also link it in the description below to buy them now. It's $25 for 5 presets. Like I was saying before, all my presets are inspired by my different travels, so when you download them, you'll see that they're named after different places. This is just because I created each preset kind of in response to having a new set of images that I took in that place that I wanted to edit in a certain style. So they range from light and bright, like I was just showing you with my last example, to a more like dark and moody vibe. There's really something for everybody there, so I encourage you to check it out. Now that you've got the editing part totally down, I want to show you what kinds of photos get the most likes on Instagram. I actually did an entire experiment where I used my feed to test out what kind of photos people are more likely to engage on. So if you want to know the secret to getting more likes on your Instagram photos, check out this video next. You know what? Normally I would tell you to subscribe. Don't even bother subscribing. Just go watch this video because I know you're going to love it. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in this one. Okay, bye.